to give us an update on the project. Before he has a chat with Dialogue Chairman Christopher Brown, please welcome the CEO of Western Sydney Airport, Simon Hickey.
Thank you very much. Western Sydney is Australia, quintessential modern Australia. For the true Australian experience, I'd argue you have to look west. 1 in 10 Australians live in Western Sydney. Home to people from hundreds of diverse cultures, around 270 ancestries, united by their strong community spirit, love of family, determination to work hard and build a better future for themselves and for the generation to follow. Western Sydney is also home to one of Australia's largest populations of Aboriginal people, our traditional owners, the first Australians. On that note, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and importantly, the traditional owners of the land on which we are building Western Sydney International Nancy Bird Walton Airport, the Cabral people of the Darug Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people everywhere. I'm delighted to be speaking to you today to take you on a journey about why I was drawn to this job and why Western Sydney International Airport is the most significant infrastructure project underway in Australia today. More importantly, I'll talk to you about why that matters for mums, dads, workers and small business owners across Western Sydney and beyond. Western Sydney Airport is the most significant infrastructure project underway in Australia. And while you'd expect its CEO to say something like that, it's my hope that by the end of today you'll have the same appreciation for this once-in-a-century project that I do. Most people in this room are here for the same reason. We are industry, government and business leaders who care deeply about Western Sydney, its people and the region's significance to the future of our city, state and nation as a whole. It's no secret that Sydney is the gateway to Australia. The offering for those looking for an iconic Australian experience is huge, but the rich cultural diversity spreads far beyond the Opera House and Bondi Beach. The Western Sydney community is expansive. The region has everything you want in a place to live, work and raise a family. Good schools, shopping centres, leafy and green parks, weekend sport, neighbourly spirit. But for too long, the region has missed out on the priority and the investment needed to get the most out of the community's passions and talents. But with the federal government's $5.3 billion investment, the West is set to be home to Sydney's new airport, and all that's changing. Put simply, from the point of view of the economies of Sydney, New South Wales and indeed Australia, everything depends on Western Sydney. Mining booms aside, Sydney has always driven Australia's GDP, and the future of Sydney's growth and its ability to be the cornerstone of our nation's economy isn't on the shores of Sydney Harbour or the high-rise of the financial district. It's in Western Sydney, in Parramatta, Liverpool, Penrith, Campbelltown and surrounds, and of course the future Western Sydney Aerotropolis, with Western Sydney International Airport as its central proposition and enabler. Think about this. If you're a tradie or a small business owner working hard to pay the bills, put food on the table and get ahead in Western Sydney, particularly in the financial aftermath of COVID-19, why does a future airport in the region matter to you? Why does living in the region that's the cornerstone of Sydney's economy help to ensure the next generation can live better than the one before it. Cities of the past were developed around ports and railway lines. But in today's global world, it's airports that are the beating heart of modern metropolises. In 2015, a European study by Intervistas showed a direct link between aviation connectivity and increased GDP. CEO of Brussels Airport and then President of Airports Council International, Arno Feist, said the report's figures clearly show that airports and their associated aviation partners are not just providing a service to other industries and the travelling public, but they are in fact a key driver and facilitator of economic growth and prosperity. He went on to say that while economic growth naturally supports air connectivity, increased air connectivity also supports economic growth. For every 10% increase in a country's air connectivity, GDP per capita is lifted by 0.5%. That's astonishing. It's so significant. Airports around the world now make a fundamental contribution to the economies of the vast majority of nations. Changi Airport generates over 5% of Singapore's GDP, while Heathrow provides 25% of the jobs in the communities around the airport. And the same can be and should be expected of Western Sydney International when it's in operation from late 2026. But again, I ask, what does this actually mean and why does it matter? Economies, GDP, growth, it's all just theory, so intangible to most people. Let me explain why that's not the case. Why does Western Sydney International Airport, driving job creation and investment in the region that in turn drives Sydney and Australia's GDP, matter to every person living in Western Sydney? Whether your child is a straight-A student, good with their hands, or even if your child isn't a child anymore. Whether you run a small business, a news agency, a one-person plumbing service, or you employ a handful of people in a cafe or a cleaning business. Or whether you've recently found yourself without a job because of the pandemic, or your workload has increased in spite of it. You see, when most people think about the economy, they think about big business. Men and women in suits on the wrong side of the latte line. They think about wealth, money, privilege. But that's not what the real economy is. The real economy is whether the hairdresser in Penrith has to work every day next year to make ends meet, or whether she can afford to take her family on a holiday. The real economy is whether the labourer from Narellan has to keep paying for more and more repairs to patch up the family car, or whether they can afford to upgrade it. And the real economy is whether the single mum from Blacktown is heartbroken again because a child has to go to school as the kid who can't afford what others can, or whether she has enough left over this week for them to go on an excursion or get a new pair of shoes. That's the real economy. It's a series of alternatives for everyday people. And it's those alternatives that Western Sydney International Airport will influence for the better for so many people across Western Sydney, and indeed Greater Sydney and Australia over the decades to come. This airport is going to provide better alternatives for kids who haven't even been born yet. And that's the reason I'm so proud to have this job. To be the CEO of an organisation which is transforming the way so many people live and how empowered they are to access better alternatives. I accepted this role knowing the generational impact this project will have and is already having on the local community. Before the pandemic, Western Sydney Airport used to attend a lot of community events, and I hope we will again before too much longer. Shortly after I started, one of our community engagement team members told me a story about an encounter they had at the airport info stand at the Luddenham show last year. A local resident was chatting to the team, and it's fair to say she wasn't terribly fussed about the airport. And as she spoke about a couple of her concerns, there was another woman who was standing near with her young son, about 7 or 8 years old. And she overheard and piped up and said, "I'm not worried about any of that. People live near airports all over the world. This airport will give my son a job." Think about that for a moment. This airport will give my son a job. That's exactly what Western Sydney International will offer the local community. Jobs of all kinds, in ground crew, customer service, retail, all the jobs at the myriad of employers in the on-airport business park and our cargo facility. And that's just the airport itself. There's a new city being built around it. Can you imagine what the flow-on effects will be in the terms of jobs and investments? It's staggering. That mother at the Luddenham show was right. During construction of the first stage, Western Sydney International is expected to generate $2.3 billion in total added value across Sydney, with $1.9 billion, or 83% of that value, going to Western Sydney. 5 years into operation, by 2031, Western Sydney International is estimated to generate an additional $27 million per year in profits for businesses in Western Sydney alone. And by 2060, Western Sydney International is expected to contribute a $24 billion increase to Australia's GDP. The airport is the catalyst for more than $15 billion of transport infrastructure investment in the region, including the Sydney Metro, Western Sydney Airport, the M12 motorway, and upgrades to other key arterial roads surrounding the airport site. Western Sydney International has been recognised by Infrastructure Australia as a high priority project, but consider this. It is supported by another high priority project, the M12. Two high priority initiatives, corridor preservation for future fuel lines and corridor preservation for future additional rail connections. And another priority project, future additional public transport connections to the airport. The surrounding Western Sydney Aerotropolis will become a thriving economic centre in Western Sydney. Its proximity to Sydney's new airport will contribute to the target of 200,000 jobs in the Western Parkland city across high-tech industries, offering high-quality jobs. But we don't have to wait till 2026 for this offering. Already now, in 2020, of the employees working hard to deliver Western Sydney International Airport, 54% are from the local community, from Western Sydney and the Blue Mountains. We're really proud of that figure, 54%. Western Sydney International means jobs and opportunities close to where people live and raise their family. When you look at multi-city airports around the world, you may wonder how they compete and complement each other. In London, both Gatwick and Luton airports predominantly service their catchment areas. People closer to the airport are more likely to travel closer to home. Western Sydney International has a substantial catchment area, and it's growing. Almost 3 million people will be closer to Western Sydney International when it opens in late 2026, making it a convenient choice for many. But the market potential of Western Sydney International far exceeds that. Our unrestricted operations and injection of new capacity creates the potential for Australian and overseas airlines to create new routes and products to Australia's global city. The rhetoric that regularly surrounds a second airport in a major city often leads many to believe its offerings will be low cost or discount. But let me be clear. When Western Sydney International welcomes its first passengers, it will be a domestic and international passenger and air cargo airport served by a range of passenger airlines, full service and low cost. It will have capacity for up to 10 million passengers annually, and the runway will be able to handle any modern airliner, including the new generation ultra-long-haul airliners like the A350-1000 and the Boeing 777X. These aircraft need more runway because they are so heavy when they take off, full of enough fuel to take them from Western Sydney to the other side of the world without stopping. Its Cat 3B instrument landing system, only the second in Australia, the first being in Melbourne, will mean that aircraft will be able to continue taking off and landing in adverse weather conditions that currently shut down Sydney skies. If you're due to land at Kingsford Smith on a morning of thick fog in 2027, chances are you're landing at Western Sydney International. But let's address the elephant in the room, COVID-19. There's no denying this virus has had a significant impact on aviation and tourism across the globe. In fact, that's an understatement. The industry has been decimated, particularly here in Australia, with so many state borders closed for so long. We're only now starting to contemplate a recovery for our domestic market. So you may ask, why are we still building a major international airport? The fact is the need for Western Sydney International is as strong as it has ever been. The International Air Transport Association predicts aviation will return to pre-COVID growth levels at the end of 2024 at the latest, 2 years before Western Sydney International begins operations. That estimate was before recent news of vaccines and the possibility of vaccination programs starting very soon, and in fact already have started in the UK. Western Sydney International has been designed to grow and expand with demand in stages and over decades, eventually catering for 82 million passengers a year in the 2060s, comparable to Dubai, Heathrow and JFK today. It will become the biggest gateway to Australia. The design is thoughtful, with consideration to how tomorrow's technology will come together with great design, intuitive wayfinding and dedicated customer service to create a fast and easy experience for passengers and airlines. As 2020 draws to a close, every day brings us closer to this vision being realised. Thanks to the advocacy of so many, from our political leaders to the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue and many others. Western Sydney Airport will proudly be the beating heart of a thriving and vibrant precinct, supporting growth and prosperity, stimulating new business and investment, and enhancing our state's offering on a global scale. It's about the economy, the real economy, creating paths to those better alternatives for Australians everywhere, for the hairdresser from Penrith, the labourer from Narellan and the single mum from Blacktown. Because we know our success is their success. We all have skin in the game when it comes to Western Sydney International Airport. No longer are people looking for the sunrise in the east. Their eyes are cast firmly in the west. Thank you.
G'day. Firstly, how come you've got a better photographer than me? Or a better head that my old man says you can't get a 10-bob head with a 10-bob photo of the 2-bob head? He was obviously right. Thanks, Simon. That was fantastic. Just to hear about the airport, I'm going to have a little more to say about the runway after these people go and collaborate after a bit of morning tea. Remember collaboration, remember networking, remember talking to people? You're about to experience it, ladies and gentlemen, 2020 style. Simon, thanks for that. We're talking about a region. Firstly, it's about names. You are the longest named airport in the world. By the time it's built, we might shorten that. It's appropriate no one's flying there at the moment because the only two airports in Australia with international in their name are Hobart and Canberra. What do they have in common? No international flights. But we hope that's not the future for WSA.
Unfortunately, with COVID, we've been the busiest airport in Australia for some time this year.
You're an overnight success story. I'm going to be talking this morning about legacy, and you've already touched on it. I know you're pretty proud. I think 54% of your workforce is drawn from Western Sydney. The most transformative project in the most transformative region in Australia. The bar's set high for you, and we'll continue to set the bar high. And we promised, myself, the Telegraph, Dave Borge, a few others got together to make this airport a reality, having originally sat on the committee to select it. I didn't want it to get dust on the shelf, and made it happen. We promised Western Sydney, if they were prepared to cop the downside of airports, we'd offer them Smart Jobs Future. And I know, some dopes like Ed Husing and others still oppose it, but essentially you're pretty proud of the fact that you're starting to deliver it in advance. Already before the airport's opening, we're getting those upscale jobs for kids of the West.
Yeah, I think the airport is the linchpin to the development that is occurring around it. Western Sydney Aerotropolis, what the linchpin to that is going to be the airport. And the airport is, I think, the fundamental for a country like Australia, having that air transport connection to the world, having a 24/7 airport in the major gateway in Australia from Western Sydney. I think that that's going to lead to, as I said, growth, jobs, different alternatives for kids who are not even born yet. They will live a different life because of what we're putting in place here. And I think that's a fantastic thing to be involved in.
And just that legacy, and I'm going to talk about that after morning tea, but are you imposing that legacy? We're going to come to everybody soon and talk about, to governments, to contractors, to financiers, suppliers, that we're going to be serious about this legacy. We get one shot in the locker here. How are you making your supply chain meet your standards and even go beyond your, challenge them to go beyond your standards of social procurement?
Yeah, so we're very, in looking at the supply chain, and there was some discussion this morning about the difficulties of supply chain in the current environment, and that's very true, actually. But in looking at our supply chain, we're certainly looking at, we're putting our performance criteria into our contractors, and we're measuring them. We're encouraging them to go beyond that. We're starting a reconciliation action plan, so we've already got a high water mark in terms of how we engage with our local Aboriginal community, but we're going further beyond that. We're very much about and part of our community. When you look at modern airports, and I'm talking about next generation airports, not the old airports, these are community spaces. These are places where people go to meet. They might go there for a meal. They might go there because we're going to have a concert in the ground somewhere. There's a whole lot of reasons about why you might be at this airport. And I think that when you look at what we're designing and what we're building, and we're about 30% designed on the terminal at the moment, this will be a standout building. Okay. In Western Sydney as well. I've
got to ask you, the clock's telling us we've got to go and have a cup of tea in a minute, so literally a minute. If you read the Telegraph this morning or you're seeing on paper, we've come out audaciously and said, why are we being half-assed and building half an airport up front? Why don't we do two runways now? I don't expect you or Karen to have to throw federal government policy out the window, but were there a change in Canberra and suddenly they said to the contractors, while you're here, we'll save the taxpayers $1 to $2 billion and keep going and build the second one. Is it logistically possible, regardless of whether, I'd ask you to make a comment on the policy decision, but operationally, can that happen?
Yeah, so it's not, as you say, it's not for me to say around building a second airport. In terms of logistics, as we are doing the bulk earthworks, it can be logistically done at this point in time, or we can come back to it. There is always the opportunity to build that second runway, and we are keeping that land there for that particular option. So logistically, it is a feasible thing to do. And obviously, you're always a big thinker, Chris. My job is to build the best new generation airport that's going to be massively successful for Western Sydney, that's going to attract the best airlines from here and around the world, and the best cargo operations that we can get coming through here, and it's going to be the linchpin for that growth that I was
Well, I don't know what you know about building airports, what with your Qantas and Lend-Lease background. You know, they found a bloke who's built them and you've been the other side landing at them. And I just made a note, I can tell the Prime Minister, Simon says we can do it, so you should get on with it. I'm sure you'll join me in keeping your secret. I'm going to invite you to go, and I don't know where you're going for a cup of coffee, wherever it is, enjoy it, because we don't get to do it enough these days. From this end, how good is that room? Humans out here, liaising with humans, collaborating again, staring down COVID and doing our bit. We do it sensibly, we can keep doing it. I promised the Health Minister I'd remind you all. Could you please join me, not only in what he said today, but for leading the most transformative project in the most transformative region in the country at a time when Bradfield built Sydney Harbour Bridge to get, to come out of recession, give people hope. This is our Harbour Bridge. This is our portal to the world, not only North Sydney to the rocks. And it's really, really important. There's nothing more important for us. Please thank Simon Hickey.